In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers entered the northern Ural Mountains on a routine winter trek. None of them came back. What searchers found at Dyatlov Pass defied explanation. They found a tent slashed open from the inside, bodies scattered across frozen terrain, some barefoot in minus 30 degrees Celsius conditions, and others with crushing chest injuries but no external wounds. There was radiation on their clothing. The Soviet investigation attributed the deaths to a compelling natural force, and it closed the file. 65 years later, no single theory accounts for all of the evidence. To understand what really happened that night, you have to start with who walked into that mountain. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, and a senior at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, LED the group. He had organized several winter expeditions before and was known for his careful planning and technical skill. Alongside him were 8 other hikers, most in their early 20s, all with backgrounds in engineering, physics, or chemistry. Zinaida Kolmogorova, age 20, had completed several mountain treks. Lyudmila Dubinina, also 20, was a skilled cross-country skier. Alexander Kolevatov, 24, brought experience from the university's ski club. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignol, 23, studied geology and was familiar with the region's terrain. Semyon Zolotaryov, at 28, was the oldest and a veteran of Soviet expeditions. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, had a background in long-distance skiing. Rustem Slobodin, 23, and Alexander Zolotov, 24, rounded out the group with strong winter navigation skills. Their route was ambitious, a 2-week journey starting from the railway outpost of Ivdel, traveling by truck to Vijay, then on foot toward the remote Otorten Peak at coordinates 61 degrees, 45 minutes, 16 seconds north, 59 degrees, 26 minutes, 42 seconds east. The plan called for a gradual ascent along the Ural River Valley, a cache of supplies in the forest, and a final push over Kholat Shakal, meaning dead mountain in the local Mansi language, before reaching Otorten. Every member was experienced, every step carefully plotted. The group photo taken before departure shows 9 confident faces, unaware of the fate that would turn their names into a mystery for generations. The group's equipment was packed with precision, reflecting months of planning and hard-earned experience. A single canvas tent, the Moscow type, served as their only shelter, wide enough for 9, but heavy and cumbersome, especially in deep snow. Each hiker carried a Moscow-style sleeping bag, layers of wool clothing, and ski boots designed for sub-zero travel. The manifest listed about 20 kilograms of food rations per person, with staples like condensed milk, bread, and dried meat. A portable radio, several compasses, and a 35mm camera were packed alongside spare batteries and film. Dyatlov's logbook, found later in the abandoned tent, detailed their daily progress and supply checks. On January 31st, the last diary entry was made. The note described worsening weather with a forecast of minus 30 degrees Celsius and strong winds sweeping the pass. Spirits remained high, but the group decided to set up camp early, just below the ridge. That night, Lyudmila Dubinina wrote, "The wind is strong, we can barely stand. Tomorrow, we'll try to reach the pass." Yuri Yudin, the only member to turn back, forced by illness, watched his friends disappear into the whiteout. He would become the sole survivor, carrying with him the memory of their last morning together and the knowledge that, for the rest, the final word had already been written. On February 3rd, a formal telegram requesting a search was sent to the Sverdlovsk prosecutor's office. The Dyatlov group's failure to report back by the planned date had raised immediate concern among their peers and the university's hiking club. Within a day, local officials authorized a search and rescue operation. The first team to reach the region, 4 hunters from Vijay, set out on February 5th. moving on skis toward the base of Kholat Shachel. Their progress was slow, with snowdrifts and plunging temperatures complicating every step. By February 6th, a civil defense unit with sled dogs joined the effort, followed by additional volunteers and a Soviet military detachment. Searchers relied on telegrams and portable radios to coordinate movements, often relaying updates from makeshift field posts back to Sverdlovsk. As the days passed, the operation expanded. Helicopters from the 123rd Flight Detachment began aerial sweeps, while local Mansi guides were recruited to help navigate the terrain. Despite increasing manpower, the search parties found only wind-scoured snow and empty valleys. Each day without news deepened the sense of urgency. By February 24th, more than 2 weeks had passed since the group's last contact. It was not until February 26th that a combined team spotted the outline of a tent on the mountainside. The discovery would shift the search from hope to a grim investigation. The tent stood on the exposed slope, half collapsed, its canvas wall sliced open from the inside. Investigators measured the cut at roughly 30 centimeters, a single decisive slash, not a tear from wind or weight, but a deliberate exit made with a knife. The original protocol, signed by lead investigator Maslenikov, noted that the normal entrance flap remained buttoned shut. Snow had drifted inside, but the footprint of the camp was otherwise undisturbed. Inside, nearly all the group's gear was left behind. Boots, spare clothing, a working compass, and a camera loaded with film. Food rations for several days sat untouched. Even the hikers' logbooks and Dyatlov's route diary were found in place, preserved under a thin layer of frost. No avalanche debris, no heavy snowpack or broken poles appeared in the immediate area, just the tent, its sharp-edged cut, and the scattered belongings. These details, recorded in the initial protocol sheets and photographs, raised more questions than answers. Why would 9 experienced hikers abandon their shelter and essential gear in the middle of a Siberian night, leaving behind every tool for survival? Official autopsy reports, preserved in the Moscow Institute of Forensic Medicine and later digitized, offer the clearest window into what confronted investigators after the hikers' bodies were recovered. The documents, stamped with the case number R195903, catalog injuries with a level of detail that still unsettles forensic experts decades later. 6 of the 9 victims showed signs of hypothermia, but 3 exhibited trauma that defied easy explanation. Lyudmila Dubinina's autopsy notes multiple fractured ribs on both sides of her chest, collapsed lungs, and massive internal bleeding. Semyon Zolotaryov's file records an equally severe pattern: 5 broken ribs, a crushed chest cavity, and no external wounds to match the force required for such damage. Nikolai Thibault Brignol's skull fracture spanned nearly 13 centimeters, described as incompatible with life in the report. The pathologist remarked that the force needed for these injuries would have been comparable to a car crash, yet the bodies showed minimal external bruising or lacerations. Other findings deepened the mystery. Several victims were missing soft tissue, Dubinina's tongue, and part of her lips, Zolotaryov's eyeballs, and fragments of facial muscle. The official explanation attributes this to post-mortem decomposition in the running meltwater of the ravine, but the precision of the loss raised questions among later reviewers. The distribution of clothing among the group was irregular. 4 were found in only underwear or a single layer. Others had multiple jackets but no shoes. Some wore garments that clearly belonged to other members, suggesting an attempt to share or recover clothing in the final moments. Radiation readings, logged on March 4th in the laboratory protocol, added a final layer of confusion. A Geiger-Muller counter registered 3 to 4 microsieverts per hour on the outer jackets of Dubinina and Zolotaryov, levels several times above the regional background. No source of contamination was identified at the site. The logbook notes that the radioactive particles could be washed off, ruling out neutron activation or a nuclear detonation, but leaving open the possibility of environmental fallout or contaminated material from prior work at Mayak, the nearby nuclear facility. Pathologist Sergei Mikhailov, who reviewed the original files for a modern re-examination, noted the high-energy nature of the chest injuries and the absence of classic avalanche markers, no asphyxiation, no snow packed in airways, no crushing of the tent's interior. The forensic evidence preserved in these sheets and radiology logs left investigators with a puzzle: severe trauma, unexplained radiation, and a pattern of exposure and undress that resisted any single straightforward cause. The irregular pattern of clothing found on the Dyatlov hikers remains one of the most confounding aspects of the case. The official inventory, reconstructed from autopsy records, and the detailed clothing chart in the case file shows a group divided by exposure. 4 victims were found in little more than underwear or a single thermal layer, despite minus 30 degrees temperatures. Others, like Dubinina and Zolotaryov, wore multiple jackets and sweaters, but lacked boots or proper leg coverings. Some garments were clearly not their own. Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivonyshenko's wool pants, and Zolotaryov wore Dubinina's faux fur coat. The shifting of clothing between bodies, especially those found furthest from the tent, suggests a desperate attempt to share warmth or recover items from fallen companions. Yet the timeline implied by the distribution is difficult to reconcile. Why did some manage to redress, while others remained nearly naked? These gaps in the physical evidence are mirrored by contradictions in the eyewitness record. Transcripts of interviews with local Mansi hunters, conducted by investigator Maslenikov, introduce a new layer of uncertainty. One Mansi spokesperson described seeing glowing orbs in the sky above the pass on February 2nd, along with a distant, low-frequency boom that echoed across the ridge before dawn. These accounts, entered into the 1959 protocol and later cited in witness depositions, do not appear in the final summary of the prosecutor's report. The omission has fueled speculation about what was considered relevant or credible during the original inquiry. Archival maps and body recovery diagrams introduce further discrepancies. The official case file lists the distance from the tent to the furthest body as 200 meters. However, field sketches and search party logs record that the last remains were found nearly 1 kilometer from the original campsite, deep in a wooded ravine. Modern overlays of the search grid, when compared to the original Soviet maps, reveal mismatches in the placement of both tent and bodies. These inconsistencies complicate any reconstruction of the hikers' final movements and raise questions about the accuracy or intent of the official documentation. The cumulative effect of these anomalies is to widen the investigation well beyond medical or forensic puzzles. The partial undress, the relocation and repurposing of clothing, the uncorroborated witness reports of lights and sounds, and the contradictory mapping of the scene all point to a case riddled with uncertainties. Each gap in the record, whether in the distribution of a sweater or the omission of a witness statement, becomes another piece of a puzzle that resists a single tidy solution. As the case files pass from one generation of investigators to the next, the need to test every theory against these unresolved details only grows more urgent. A side-by-side comparison of the main theories against the anomalies found at Dyatlov Pass reveals sharp limits to every explanation. The most widely cited evidence matrix, drawn from both Soviet-era protocols and modern forensic reviews, lays out 7 core anomalies: the tent cut from the inside, barefoot tracks in deep snow, fatal chest trauma, unexpected radiation, witness reports of glowing orbs, the forecast of katabatic wind, and the absence of avalanche debris. When the avalanche hypothesis is mapped against this list, it accounts for some, but not all, of the facts. The cut in the tent and the barefoot escape fit a sudden snow load or panic after a slab shift. Katabatic wind, present in the weather logs, could have contributed to the group's urgency. Yet the absence of classic avalanche debris, such as a snowplow or crushed poles, stands out as a clear mismatch. Even more problematic is the nature of the chest injuries. Multiple autopsy reports describe rib fractures and internal damage without the external crushing or asphyxiation typical of burial trauma. Avalanche models, including those published in 2021, fail to fully recreate the precise injury patterns seen in Dubinina, Zolotaryov, and Thibault-Brignol. The military testing theory finds a different set of matches. Radiation detected on the jackets of Dubinina and Zolotaryov aligns with the possibility of environmental contamination, especially given Krivonischenko's prior work at Mayak. Witness statements about glowing orbs and a distant boom also fit the profile of a weapons test or atmospheric event. However, no official records confirm a military operation on the night in question, and the lack of blast injuries or widespread burns among the victims weakens this scenario. The theory also struggles to explain the tent's interior cut and the pattern of undress, which do not follow the logic of a sudden external attack. Natural phenomena such as infrasound or optical illusions offer partial explanations for the panic and the reported lights. High winds could have triggered disorientation or a group flight response, accounting for the hurried exit and scattered clothing. Still, these conditions cannot account for the fatal trauma or the radiation, leaving key boxes unchecked. The possibility of human conflict, an encounter with outsiders, a fight, or criminal action matches the tent cut and the redistribution of clothing, but is contradicted by the absence of defensive wounds, weapon marks, or evidence of struggle. Forensic analysis repeatedly notes clean internal injuries without corresponding blunt force trauma on the skin. No single theory aligns with every anomaly. The matrix, color-coded and dense with check marks and blanks, underscores the case's stubborn resistance to closure. Each hypothesis explains some details but leaves others unexplained, forcing investigators and researchers to confront a puzzle that refuses to fit any one pattern. As the evidence is tallied and compared, the sense of uncertainty only deepens, driving the search for answers into more speculative territory. Even with decades of study, 5 core questions continue to resist every attempt at resolution. Each one lingers, sharpened by the very evidence that was meant to dispel confusion. First, the matter of missing organs. Why were Lyudmila Dubinina's tongue and eyes and Semyon Zolotaryov's eyeballs absent when the bodies were recovered? Autopsy records, cross-checked with photographs, describe clean tissue loss. The original pathology sheets cite post-mortem changes, but the absence of scavenger marks and the selective nature of the damage continue to provoke doubt. No conclusive sequence has been established. Second, the source of the hiker's most severe injuries remains a puzzle. Internal trauma, including multiple fractured ribs, collapsed lungs, and a skull split nearly the width of a hand, appeared in 3 victims. The forensic reports described these as high-energy impacts, comparable to a car crash. Yet the skin above the injuries showed little bruising, and there were no signs of a struggle, blunt weapon, or falling debris. No avalanche model, military test, or documented confrontation accounts for the exact combination of force and pattern. Third, the detection of radiation on Dubinina's and Zolotaryov's clothing introduces a layer of uncertainty that survives every round of re-examination. Laboratory logs recorded levels several times above local background, but the source was never identified. Theories range from contamination at the Mayak nuclear facility, where Krivonischenko had worked, to fallout from atmospheric testing, to simple environmental exposure. Still, no direct link has been established between the radioactive particles and any known event on the pass. Fourth, the irregular distribution of clothing among the group defies a single explanation. Some hikers were nearly naked, others wore layers not their own. Garments were found swapped or wrapped around exposed limbs, with no clear timeline for when or why these changes occurred. The evidence suggests desperate improvisation, but the sequence, who undressed, who redressed, and under what circumstances, remains lost to the snow. Finally, the decision to cut the tent from the inside stands as the most immediate and haunting mystery. The slash was deliberate and precise, bypassing the buttoned entrance. Was it a panicked response to a real threat, an avalanche, a sudden noise, a chemical irritant, or an act of confusion in the grip of hypothermia? Or did something outside the tent force the group to act in concert, abandoning every tool for survival? Each question has drawn its own school of thought, yet none has found a home in certainty. The Dyatlov Pass files, dense with protocols and diagrams, leave these core mysteries untouched. In the end, the case remains defined not by what is known, but by the sharp edges of what still cannot be explained. Official files on the Dyatlov Pass case remain partially classified today, and new scientific reviews still leave critical questions unresolved. In an era when information is more accessible than ever, genuine mystery persists, reminding us that some truths resist even the most rigorous inquiry. The unanswered details at Dyatlov Pass challenge our certainty and invite us to keep questioning what we think we know. Share your thoughts below.